Good afternoon. Welcome to the third Thursday in August. I had to look and see what month am I in because it's felt like it's been a crazy back to school start.
Yes.
So thank you all for joining us. Many of you are joining us probably from your classroom, like Peg today, where you just got out of school not that long ago and said, "Hey, I want some more math."
Yes.
And who could better to come and learn from than the Peg Kegel? So we're super excited today. But before we get going with that, just want to give a big thank you to all of our COE and partners who make this possible. They help us identify and say, "Hey, we really want to hear from that voice in our math world." And then we do our best to get them here. And they help us promote and help us after this recording goes live. They help us share it back out to their constituents as well. So just a big thank you to all of them. And of course, the Gates Foundation for helping many CMC initiatives right now, especially supporting the use of high quality instructional materials. With that, Peg, I don't really know that you need that much of an introduction. I think everyone here already knows you based on how I'm seeing the response here. They all came to love you. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the Peg
All right.
or Aunt
So let
Peg.
me let me go ahead. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So, you all showed up apparently because you are huge fans of Dwayne and Cole, which is what I am assuming, because there was nothing that told you what I was going to talk about. So I want you to just take a moment and look at my opening slide. Stop looking for answers, because that's what I want to talk to you about today. But first, let's stop, and I'm actually going to take a moment to introduce myself because I know these fine gentlemen are going to take whatever nonsense I come up with today, and they're actually going to, post-production the hell out of it and turn it into a finely crafted piece of, I don't know, wisdom, 45 seconds long. But because that may be going out to folks who didn't necessarily show up because of me, I thought I would do a really quick overview. Unlike many of you, I didn't start out to be a teacher. This is all a horrible mistake. I don't know, horrible, but this is all a huge mistake for the last 30 years. I wandered in here. I actually started out to be an architect, and I spent 15 years doing that. And that's how I got into teaching, because I started teaching in architecture and found out teaching was really, truly amazing. Now, I am currently at high school, but I spent 17 years teaching middle school, 3 years teaching university, and this is now year 10 for me in high school. And yes, I did teach during COVID. And if you are wondering, we used to have theme of the week, which is how my students would be encouraged to, they would vote on what our theme was for the week. So the week that you're seeing featured there was Star Wars / Star Trek week, where I actually dressed as Princess Leia to discuss the volume of, yes. Headphones are great when you strap giant balls of yarn to them. There's a few highlights there, but the very bottom one is probably the most current and most pertinent one, which is I am indeed CMC South president-elect. Cole and I will be counterparts because we are both sort of taking over those, moving out of we will slash do a strike through on the elect part come January 1st, and Cole will be working in Central while I'm representing South. So that's a little bit about me. So let's go back and think about that opening slide. Stop looking for answers. So I am going to clarify what I mean, but I'm really curious to know what you think I mean. So what do you imagine when you think about stop looking for answers? What do you suppose I might mean? What do you maybe afraid I might mean? But I would really love to get some reaction from you just to that opening of stop looking for answers. Ooh, Lisa, I love it. And Dwayne, Cole, I would I would welcome you to, what do you want to say?
Well, I was going to say exactly what Lisa typed, but she typed faster. So I'm going to come up with my plan B, which is not only are answers important, but maybe we should stop searching for answers, but also we should start instead looking for questions that are worthy of exploring. And that there's probably value in searching for questions rather than just searching for answers.
Awesome.
I actually went above the teacher level to the system level and started thinking about we probably are already doing things, and instead of abandoning, like how can we maybe just do those things better in some ways, as opposed to looking for something new all the time.
Awesome. So I'm also scanning through the things that people are typing, and I have to tell you, oh, did I mention that my room has a automatic system of turning off the lights if I don't get up and wander around? So I will periodically do this to turn the lights back on. Yeah, keeping it real.
I will not edit that from post production. That's just fun.
At least there's a spot like 2 feet in front of me that I can hit with a book that, either that or the kids have to get up and we do dance break. So much of what you said is indeed part of the talk. So much of what you said is the bigger aspect of this. It certainly isn't stop looking for answers as in we should stop learning. We need to learn more and we need to learn better. But that means we need to learn about what our kids are thinking about and what our kids are learning. And unfortunately, that isn't always what's happening in class because this is the reality that we all face. Well, so much for that. It didn't click. There we go. The reality is that, answer getting is, if you ask people what answer getting is about, what mathematics is about, they really truly think it's about answer getting. And unfortunately, they also think that it's not just answer getting, but answer getting done at speed. And until we start to really disrupt that, I don't think we're going to make as much progress as we need to, as kids need to, and as we know we are capable of. But we've got to be way more intentional and way more ferocious at attacking this. So I want us to take a moment and think about, okay, if we have to attack that, we need to know where it comes from. We need to know what the root causes for it are. And I'm going to propose a little bit of what I think is what leads us to that. I love this slide. I love this slide. I'm just going to own this. This is unfortunately how most students in America approach a math class. They approach it the same way that any rational human being would approach a minefield. You come up to the edge and you stop. You wait for somebody with insider knowledge, not just anybody, but somebody who somehow has some kind of arcane insider, secret knowledge to go out in front of you. And then you spend all of your time and energy watching the steps. And you try to replicate exactly what they've done because that's the only way you're going to survive. And the entire goal is to get through safely. Think about what happens when you come out of this, even if you do survive. If anybody were to ask you about the landscape, you didn't even think there was a landscape because all you were doing was looking at, don't go there, do this, do this, do this. The idea that you have a sense of where you traveled, you have a sense of what was around, totally not there, all right? Now, I think that part of the answer to that is to go to this. I don't want a minefield. I want a mud festival. I want kids who jump in, who recognize that it's inherently messy, but that it's so phenomenally joyous to be messy. And that's how they feel when they come to my class. That's what I want. So if you get nothing else out of this entire presentation, please take away this one. We need to stop laying minefields. We need to yield to mud wrestling, because that's going to help us do so much of the work that we want, so much of what we know is going to make things better for kids, which means it's also going to make things better for teachers, which is going to make it better for all of us. All right. Now, and I truly didn't know Annie was going to be here. Stop and go watch this Ignite. Okay, maybe don't stop and go watch this, but go watch it afterwards when we're finished. I'm really curious just to know how many of you know this Ignite in particular. Not just that you know who Max is, but yes, you are everywhere, Annie. You're constantly in my head. Why 2 is greater than 4? Annie, I know you know it because you were there with me when we saw Max do this, but who else is familiar with this Ignite in particular? Love it. And I love that the yes came with an exclamation point. All right. All right. Okay. Ben, I didn't know you were with us. Awesome. Excellent. Okay. So I'm going to give you a little teeny tiny spoiler, but it looks like a bunch of you already know this, that Max proves by induction that listening to students is more powerful, more important than listening for answers. And he even frames answers as listening for the thing you need to hear so that you can move on. And I think about that all the time, this idea that very often what we want when we're prompting kids to give an answer is really what allows us to then take those next steps within our own thinking and our own opportunity to move forward in our teaching. And that should not fall on the responsibility of children. So, all right. So even though we get it, right? 2 is greater than 4. Absolutely, 100%. I'm echoing the great Max here. It's hard to do, right? It's hard. It's hard to stop looking for answers. It's hard to stop thinking about them. So I hope I'm going to maybe give you some new things to talk about or some new ways to think about things you were already thinking about in this work by let's looking at how to stop in a variety of places. So ways to stop in discussion, ways to stop looking for answers in the middle of class when you're having a discussion, whether it's at a small group, whether it's at across the whole classroom. What can you do? Oh, and I'm going to be so distracted by the running joke in my family. Ooh, look, Peg, shiny object. So the fact that things are showing up in the chat means I absolutely want to be reading the chat because I might have ADD. I'm laughing at the might. Annie is probably laughing hysterically right now. Devalue the answer. If we know kids are so obsessed with the answer, and especially, I will tell you, this became absolutely essential for me to do this when I taught gifted and highly gifted kids. Mathematically precocious kids who had defined their mathematical brilliance based on, oh, I'm really good at calculations and I can do it faster than anybody. And so how did I get them to not necessarily, find zero value with that, but to find that there were more things that were more exciting and more interesting than, oh, I could out-calculate somebody else. And the way I did it was just to tell them the answer up front. Completely derails them, right? So this is one of the great Fawn's visual problems. And the question is, how many squares are there going to be when we get to the 43rd step in the pattern? Well, I could have left there, right? That is the classic thing to ask. But I tell them, oh, and by the way, it's 1937. So let's get that out of the way. So now you can do the interesting stuff. Well, the first few times you do stuff like this with students, you will get such pushback. You will get kids who absolutely groan. They sound like they're in pain because you've just robbed them of what they think their mathematical strength is, because they were going to come up with that 1937 faster than the kid next to them. And that was going to prove to you that they were really good at mathematics. Completely different talk, but over my shoulder, which I know you can see, don't take that out in post-production. Over my shoulder is a little bit of a display about mathematical smartnesses. And that's something that I work really, really hard at in my classrooms, is disrupting what kids think it means to be mathematically smart so that they can expand what it means to be mathematically smart. But one of the things that we can do, just give them the answer. You don't want them to focus on that? Get it out of the way. And I even say it to them. We're going to get it out of the way so we can focus on the interesting part. All right. Pick tasks that have multiple correct answers, right? There is an entire approach to teaching mathematics that comes out of, it's probably another one of those things that actually came out of the United States at some point, and then Japan picked it up and did it better. But the open-ended approach to teaching mathematics, this is a description of a lot of work done in Japanese classrooms where the design is very, very broad. In a lot of ways, and I was going to say this whether Annie were or not, things like notice and wonder are very much like this, right? Take a empty prism, fill it partway with water, turn it around. What do you notice? You might notice, oh, it changes shapes. It isn't always rectangular. It gets to be that, right? All these different things. And if you've never played with a water container filled partway up, Fuji water bottles. Fuji water is expensive, but the bottles are worth it because the cross section is square, and it's awesome to watch kids play with Fuji water bottles filled halfway up, and you can put a tiny drop of water soluble color in there just to see that top surface highlighted a little bit more. But it's completely open, right? So this idea of giving them multiple correct answers, even things that have multiple correct numeric answers, depending on what assumptions you bring to the problem. If you've never played with something called, there's a bunch of tasks about farmers doing things. Oh, wow, Jerry Becker, yes. About farmers doing things and how their crops are growing. Well, some kids might interpret it linearly, some kids are arithmetically or geometrically, and all of a sudden you get very, very different numbers, and the kids are going to start arguing about who's right, and then you tell them they're both right, and they just lose their minds, right? But that's what we want them to see. We want them to understand this idea that, number one, the answer isn't everything, and sometimes the answer is not as simple as you think it is. All right. Have you ever asked your kids in math class to give you an opinion instead of an answer? New topic, right? Here's a new topic. What do you imagine somebody might find challenging about this? What does this remind you of that we've already studied? If you were going to play, we have the would you rather kind of thing, is in a way an opinion. But what if you do would you rather about a mathematical topic? So much comes out of those discussions that are not about the traditional kinds of answers. That's really, really valuable. That hypothetical in particular is so powerful. I started doing that to start to elicit beginnings of things. And what I found is that kids really tapped into the power of hypotheticals because all of a sudden it gave them a safe way to talk about things that they were struggling with by framing it as, I can imagine that somebody would find it really confusing, right? Which is amazing because what I want to know is I want to know what they're thinking and I want to know what they're making sense of. And I really want to know what they're struggling with. Again, that idea of an opinion. Which do you think most kids would find the most challenging and why? So hand them out. You've all those worksheets that you've got in your file cabinet someplace or that are sitting in the math office someplace. Don't just take them and compost them. Hand them out, but then don't ask kids to solve them. Ask kids to analyze them. Ask kids to give you feedback. Which of these do you think would be the most challenging? Why? Which of these do you think kids would find boring? Why? Right? Is there a way that you could make this more interesting? There's so many kinds of opinion things that I could do with this besides just hand it out and have kids that would solve it. And yes, you will have kids who really, really want you just to hand it out and let them solve it and tell them, oh, if you want to solve it, sure, go for it. It's not going to bother me if you solve it, but that's not what I'm most interested in. If that makes you happy, that's terrific. Lovely. Go for it. And especially even when you do something which has a single quote unquote right numeric result, don't ask for the result. When you're having conversation in class, ask about strategies. What did you do to get started? Why did you think that would be a productive thing? Tell us about tell us something you tried that didn't turn out to work, right? Those are the really valuable and interesting questions that open up so much space for everybody in the room to think than if you just give an answer. So there actually is, I will not spin my camera around to show you, but there actually, well, maybe I should. Shall we show that it really is my classroom? There is a thing on the front of my room. Wait, I can get there. That says ask, don't tell. I'm not going to expect you to read it.
It is a classroom. This is not AI. Look at that.
Exactly. Yeah, you can see the crappy old chalkboard that has a sign on it for 2 years saying, please put a whiteboard over this obsolete chalkboard. It says ask, don't tell. Ask a good question. Everyone starts thinking, answer it, and everyone stops. So I want to make sure that everything I'm doing is soliciting opportunities for more people to think, not to close down those avenues and not to shut it down so that less people are thinking. All right. But we know that classroom discourse is not the only place where answers come into play. What about on homework? Well, some of these techniques work there too, right? First of all, we all know that we can look for and give credit, right, for evidence of effort. If I want kids to try, I need to value and I need to validate trying as something that was worthwhile. Whether or not you think it yielded productive results, trying is important. If kids aren't willing to jump in, right? You got in the mud. Awesome. I need to look for that and I need to value it. Give them something where instead of solving, again, kind of like that other page where they were analyzing, I'm asking them to rank it. I'm asking them to rate it, or I'm asking them to sort and categorize. So this originally was an assignment about systems of equations. And if you look at it, I can say this, if you look at it, that bottom part could have been taken right out of a Dulciani textbook, right? Look at all those systems of equations. Some of them look like you probably want to use substitution. Some of them look like you might want to use elimination, but all that, grinding through algebra. But instead of asking anybody to solve anything, ask them to sort it. What are two different groupings that you could make? Is there a different way that you could group them? Why would you do that? And that's actually a homework problem that some kids might find intriguing much more than pick, even if it's choice and you have to pick, there's 60, do 8 of these. Really? Seriously? Ugh. Invite students to craft and propose their own questions, their own tasks, their own stuff. You certainly can do this in the broadest way possible, but you can also make it be very, very focused and very, very specific. And I'm going to give you an example, maybe. I'm going to give you an example of what I've actually done. So I did this as an end of unit or an end of chapter review before we took an assessment. And I told the kids the answer to all your questions is 42. Now, my few serious hardcore sci-fi fans all looked up and went, 42? And I went, yeah. And they sort of looked at me and said, do you have your towel? And they all went nuts. But we'll fill you in sometime for those of you who don't get the references. Think back over everything that we've studied, everything in the chapter, and you're going to write 3 questions related to those, but the answer is already 42 because we know the answer to everything is 42. They are answering, they are thinking so hard, they are imagining, right? And then the feedback is, oh yeah, these are all 42, but I think you really only covered one idea here. And the goal was to cover 3 different ideas from within we studied. So do you think you could stretch yourself a little bit further and go a little bit farther if thinking about what else you could have done, what other sorts of questions you could have come up with? And kids get really excited about, ooh, I get to write the question. And I tell them, yeah, and as long as the answer is 42, you got it right. So you already got it right because I gave you the answer. All right. So how does this work on assessments? How do we actually shift this idea from looking for answers to looking for thinking, reasoning, sense making, all that kind of stuff, when we know the reality is that for most of us, we're teaching in systems where we still have to grade things, we still have to score things, we still have to rank things, we still have to do all of that stuff. It really comes down to us. It really comes down to us as the teacher, shifting our own thinking, shifting our own set of values, shifting our own perspectives about what's important, and stop grading, scoring, marking, giving feedback on assessment based on right and wrong, and really, really, really try to hold yourself to what counts as evidence of understanding. If I tried to teach, fill in whatever standard you're attempting to cover, if I'm trying to, I did my best, I taught my heart out. This is what I hope I taught. Have they learned it? can they give me evidence of understanding of that? And the part of this that's really, really hard is not when it's clear, complete, and convincing. What's really, really hard is recognizing those beginnings, recognizing when you just see that little tiny emerging, right? That little sprout. I am not a gardener. I am working hard. My daughter has started me off with succulents. She tells me nobody can kill a cactus. I told her I'd take that as a challenge. But thinking about how an experienced gardener can look at, hard ground, see this little tiny bit of green emerging, and know if that's the beginning of a weed or if that's the beginning of a gorgeous flower. And that's, in a sense, what we're trying to develop ourselves as educators in looking at student work, because it's easy to look for right and wrong answers, right? It's really hard to look for and figure out what counts as evidence of understanding. But until you do this, until you really hold yourself to that, on assessments, you're still only valuing the kid who did that answer getting, and not necessarily at speed, but answer getting within a set time frame. Now, the way that I do this within my own classroom is when I mark assessments, I do it with highlighters. My students will tell me that I didn't in the beginning. They're really confused by this. They will tell me that I didn't mark their paper, and I'll look at it and go, oh yeah. And they go, oh no, you just colored it. And I go, yeah, right? So clear and convincing evidence of understanding is highlighted in green. I'm sold, right? And what I tell the kids is we're going to use the same frame here that we do in almost everything in my room, which is the beginning is when you start out with anything is you got to convince yourself. Really, really hard to sell anybody on something if you haven't convinced yourself. So that's the lowest bar. The next part is, could you convince a friend? Somebody who's willing to look at it and fill in the missing pieces and maybe rearrange a little bit and help you out. But what you're shooting for, that the absolute pinnacle is, of course, to convince a skeptic. So when you've gotten to the point where it's green, you've convinced a skeptic. If you're convincing a friend is yellow, right? I can see beginnings. I can see bits and pieces. Maybe there is some parts which are productive and some parts which are flawed, but I can see that you've got some stuff there to start working with and maybe rearrange and refine, but you're on your way. Pink is when I can't see evidence of understanding. And what I tell the kids is if your paper has pink, you really should think of it as an invitation to come up and see me, because if you didn't tell me by whatever you wrote on the paper, but you can come up and show me in the moment, I will change that pink to yellow. And we're going to get better at you being able to communicate in writing what you're able to communicate verbally. But don't think pink is, hey, oh, you failed, you're done. Pink is, I can't find it here. If you, and I will have kids who say, yeah, miss, I totally didn't understand. I was, total, that was just a guess. Fine. But they will come up to me and have conversations, and I will go back over and they're like, it's yellow. And I go, absolutely, it's yellow. All right. The conversation about how all that gets turned into grades, that's a completely different talk. And yeah, it's not yet. It's 100%, right? Or it's that I'm taking ownership of I don't see it. I'm not saying it's not there. I'm saying I can't find it. I looked and wasn't able to make sense of it. If you feel like you could come up and help me make sense of it, do that, because it was, it's on me that I wasn't able to make sense of it. Help me to make sense of what you were trying to tell me. Help me make sense of how you were showing me evidence of your understanding. Yes, absolutely. About constructing arguments, right? And this idea of being able to judge arguments as well. So that's something else. That's something else we do is at the beginning of the year when I start this is I will show kids work that's flawed, and they'll instantly go, oh, that's wrong. And I'll go, whoa. We weren't saying is the final answer the quote unquote correct solution. We're saying, what evidence of understanding do you see? And I say to the kids, I said, what can you tell me that this kid understands? And they start to like list off, well, I guess they understood what addition is. Terrific, right? And you start to make a list and they are amazed that the answer is wrong. They came up with 15 things that this kid was able to evidence in their work of what's evidence of understanding. And then they start to embrace also the idea of explain your reasoning or make sure I can see your thinking, because all of a sudden they get the idea that, oh, wow, if I start writing, I have an opportunity to convince her, not just, oh, I have the answer. Other thing that a lot of kids get blown away by in the beginning is an answer alone. Answer alone isn't green. That could have come out of anywhere. And the anecdote that I'm going to share with you, because you're all teachers, goes to when I was on a panel looking at some work that was being done by a math science partnership group back in Pennsylvania. It's a long time ago in Pittsburgh. And they were working with some of Peg Smith's rich tasks that came out of the Quasar project. And so kids were working in groups and teachers were walking around the room, and it was a lot of teachers. It was kind of like a lesson study setup. So there were a lot of adults in the room, and they were working on one of those candy jar kind of problems about, Jolly Ranchers and whatever, and how many if you know this and this and this. Well, the answer was 13. I happened to be standing in the corner next to this particular group of boys who were all having a conversation about how old they were or when their birthdays were. That was where this conversation started. And they all decided to find out if they could like guess and how old, like who was the oldest. So they decided they were going to write their number down on a piece of paper and all reveal it at the same time. Teacher who was teaching the class walked by. The kids all had out a piece of paper that said 13. She checked it off because it was 13 Jolly Ranchers and kept walking. So the fact that the kids have the right answer on the paper, if you see nothing about where it came from or what it was, don't buy into it. And there's so many times where I'll look at a kid's paper and go, 13 Jolly Ranchers. I don't think so. So an answer alone is not going to get you a green. An answer alone is not clear, complete evidence of understanding, because an answer by itself is just that. It's one piece, but it's not everything. All right. I told you I was going to talk too fast when there's nobody talking back to me. This is sort of the ultimate, though. What we look for has to be what we value, right? Kind of that idea that what we assess is what we value. Well, what we look for in an assessment, what we look for within our classroom, what we look for within homework is also what we're valuing. We're saying to the kids what matters. And if we're constantly putting numeric results forward as what we're looking for, then what we're saying to kids, that's really what we value. And all the rest of the posters, all the rest of the vocabulary, all the rest of the math practices, all that's just window dressing. But what we really care about is, did I get the correct answer? Oh, that's really all you want, miss, right? So I've got to be sure that as I'm doing this, that I'm foregrounding, that I'm always very clearly communicating to kids that their reasoning, their sense making, their thinking is what I'm interested in. It's what I'm curious about. It's what I want to know. Excuse me. I want to know more about, and I want to invite them to think harder about. I want them to be curious about each other's thinking. I want them to be curious about each other's sense making. I want them to actually go, hey, wait a minute. You thought this and I thought that, and we both came up with the same thing. How did that work out? I want them to generate those kinds of questions, because until we get there, we're not going to do that important work of shifting out of that landmine universe into that mud wrestling universe. And that's what has to happen if we're really going to do what matters. If we can shift, then we can get our kids to shift. They are much younger than us. Their minds are way more adaptable. We've got a shot at doing it. And the sooner we do it, the earlier we do it, the younger we get them to sort of plant these seeds, the more it's going to make a difference and resonate. And we've got to do that if we're going to shift the culture of mathematics in this country. So why does this matter? Seriously, why does this matter, right? Aside from standards and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. Well, once upon a time, calculations really were the domain of human beings. That's what it meant to do mathematics, was to do calculations. It was not only because it was done for a pragmatic reason, but it was also the only way that calculations got done. Go and look at Hidden Figures. The job title for those women was calculator. That was a job title. Those days are far, far, far behind us. If you aren't paying attention, boy, are we getting knocked for a loop if all we're doing is teaching answer getting. And I could have said that 10 years ago and it was true. It's so much more exponentially true today, right? Think about when Wolfram Alpha first came out and you could get it on your phone for 99 cents. Now I think it's free. Probably now it's, AI'd and all the rest of it. But it didn't just give answers, it showed steps. And then it explained what the properties were that were being used to generate those steps. We now know that PhotoMath can hover over just about anything, including graphs, including things in multiple languages, and produce results. So if that's all we're training kids to do, we're training them to be obsolete. And I don't care if we're talking seniors or we're talking kindergartner kids. If that's what we're training them to do, we are building obsolescence into their education. How dare we? So we've got to do this because answers only is a dead end. And that's where I'm going to end.
Peg,
Right. And now I'm trying to read the sidebar again.
well, as you're reading, I'm going to say and compliment you. What you've blown my mind in terms of, so we often know about the SMPs and we tell teachers, do the SMPs, which is remarkably hard, standards for mathematical practice, which is remarkably hard in an economy that values the answer above everything. And you have given a roadmap for how teachers can make space for all 8 of those SMPs. When you literally give the answer ahead of time, you're left with, as a student, nothing else than to start reasoning abstractly, to construct viable arguments, to use the appropriate tools and modeling, because the answer is done. And so what else is the kid going to do? Well, we've got 8 things that the kid can do in lieu of that answer. And you just blew my mind in how simple it is to create space for teachers to do that.
And what you just said, Dwayne, the very last thing you said made me think of one of my favorite quotes by a mathematician. Now I'm just blanked on his first name, Ross, who was a professor of mathematics at Ohio State, I believe, for many, many, many years, and started the Ross Scholar Program of identifying mathematically precocious high school kids from very, very poor backgrounds typically. And we're talking back in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. And the quote that he has was to think deeply about simple things, that within mathematics, even something that quote unquote is simple still has a lot of depth to it. And there's a lot of value in really seriously looking deeply at those things. And simple doesn't mean easy.
Indeed. Indeed. Hey, Joaquin has a question.
Ooh.
They're asking if they heard you correctly, maybe about PhotoMath. Like, did you say don't show kids PhotoMath?
Oh, I didn't say do or don't. I'm saying it exists. We don't have to show it to kids. They know it exists.
Yeah.
And if all we're, right? I mean, seriously, if all we're doing is giving them the sort of things where, a 99-cent app or a free app can hover over it and do it instantaneously,
right,
then what in the world are we getting paid for as a profession? That's ridiculous, right? I mean, just like once upon a time. I mean, do you know what the first year mathematics curriculum at Dartmouth College, when it first opened, do you know what year 1 math was?
Negative numbers?
No, I was not there. I'm not quite that old. Long division.
Yeah. Okay.
Long division, right?
Yeah.
At Dartmouth. No, I know. We're not going to get into which Ivy is better than which. But my point is, once upon a time, that was college mathematics.
Right.
And it wasn't that math wasn't known and whatever, but college mathematics has evolved because mathematics has evolved because things have evolved.
Well, I think what you're saying is if photomath will give answers, it'll even give the steps, but the value that you're seeking is, but do kids understand the steps? Do they
Right. Yeah.
do they really understand and make sense of everything? Now, photomath may be a part of that. It may be there as scaffolding to help the kid think through the thing. So you're not,
or give them that and then give them something that's done incorrectly and ask them to make comparisons and stuff like that, right? So there's ways to find value and opportunity to incorporate that, but it isn't just like Sharon just put in the I showed my work. That's if we go back to, like I said, my favorite slide with the Arthur Murray dance footprints, right? You showed your steps. Yeah. Do you know why? Do you have an idea of the landscape? Can you explain to me what you saw? Right. And that's what I want. I want kids to stray off the path. I want them to define their own path. I want them to be able to stand in one spot and look all around and tell me about the landscape.
I'm just curious, like knowing that those technologies are out there and they exist, especially in the high school setting. So I finally have a high schooler now, so I can talk about it, because I know now, Peg, a whole 7 days.
You're an expert.
Woo! So, but like these things are out there, they have them on their phones. At what point do we just embrace that they're already there and we say, hey, look, we've already done the photo math for you. Can push them to a different solution strategy, saying we've already done this one. Like, have you ever had that kind of occurrence in class and just kind of call it for what it is and say, here's one?
Oh, absolutely. Like, so why does this happen? What does this mean? Right? I mean, I remember years ago teaching Algebra 1 and saying to a kid who, had come up with something, and I said, oh, awesome. So x equals 7. So what does that mean? And they just looked at me like, well, we're in a math class and you asked me what x is, and I told you x is 7. That's what that means, right? Not, oh, that means that if I were to plug x in this blah, 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 right? The most awful answer I ever got from a kid to a question I posed was, well, how do you know that's the answer? And he said, because I drew a box around it.
Yeah. So T is proposing like these follow-up questions with a photo math showing the work, which is like T's saying,
yeah,
are there instances where the steps
might not work, right? Or are there a different set of steps that would also work? Yeah. I'm going to push back a little bit on this choice of the word efficient, because efficiency very often gets turned into tricks. And I am all in on nix the tricks. And I don't let kids teach each other shortcuts. As I point out to them, a shortcut is something that you have to develop yourself because you've made sense of something. If somebody else teaches you a shortcut, they've just robbed you of the opportunity to understand. But I like work really hard at just taking efficient out of my vocabulary, because with the kids will say something and I'll say efficiency is horribly overrated.
T's agreeing with you. Yeah.
Annie, I don't know that photomath says why each step works, but Wolfram Alpha definitely does. Because I remember this is years ago, having it factor some big gnarly thing, and it gave all the rationale for each step. So I'm curious to hear like what things other people have done in this sort of same vein, because it wasn't like, I mean, I'm right now, certainly those people that are in the room, talking to the choir. So these are things that you've all thought about, which means you've all been doing them too. You could have been doing this. Well, why am I doing this? Well, you could have done this webinar. What things have you done in this effort to shift the focus from answer getting to sense making?
So while people are typing, Cole, one of the things I think we have the option, if you wish, people can ask to speak, I think. And so if you want, I think we can trust these wonderful, fine people. So if somebody wants to speak, I think they can ask for it, or we can turn that on. And so while they're typing or getting the bravery up to share, we're seeing Benjamin posting things. So I'm going to let you read that. Some things I do to encourage this kind of beyond answer getting is we might find two different solution methods that whether they arrive at the same answer or they don't, but we compare and contrast those two solution methods. Let's compare and contrast. What do we see? What's the same in both of these cases? What's different in both of these? I do this a lot with elementary, but I would imagine you could do the same in any grade. It's just let's compare and contrast these two methods that have been shared by students.
I have a question for you, Peg, because this is often a battle, right? As you are trying to convince someone else, convince your neighbor teacher that this is something that they should embrace. Because at the end of the year, we got to make sure that they're getting the answers right, or our scores are going to be right. So, what is a good balance or a mix, or how do you approach or interact with the teachers that say like the answer is the only thing that matters? Because that's what like how do you approach that work whenever you engage with maybe a new teacher that hasn't had multiple experiences?
So there's a couple of different things. Number one, I will point out what is one of the things that we hear a lot from students about mathematics, students who haven't found the joy, right? Is, oh, math is really boring. And what I'll say to them is, imagine if in English class, all they ever let you do, ever, was practice spelling words. And the whole goal was just to learn how to spell every single word perfectly. Do you think you'd love English? Do you think you'd really, be a great reader? And what you have to, yeah, we want you to be able to spell. We want you to be able to use correct grammar. But unless you've experienced that in a context, unless you've been able to invent it for yourself, you got to tell a story. You got to write a poem, right? Anybody ever have to write poems? Do we still do that in school? Do they have you write poetry when you're little kids and things, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're delightfully horrible. Right? The poetry of 8-year-olds is it's a very specialized genre that only parents can really truly love and appreciate. But the pride that you feel, the delight that you feel, the way it ignites you is so important that it makes those spelling words have a reason to exist. Because, ooh, now I can write cooler poems. Now I can tell better stories. Now I can do, maybe I can write a book. I'm going to be the great American novelist, right? And if all we're doing for kids in math is having them grind through calculations, especially when, you don't even need to calculate, a phone, right, is going to do all of that for you. Oh my goodness. No wonder they think it's boring. They're absolutely right. Sitting there and counting beans is tedious. It's boring. So I really try and get people to sort of have that view of mathematics as such a broader field and such a bigger thing. And honestly, assessments have made a teensy bit of progress towards more than simply answer getting. I once was in a thing where I'm trying to think who it was. It may have actually been Linda Darling Hammond. I don't want to call her out, but I'm pretty darn sure it was her who said, that our goal was to come up with tests worth teaching to. And I was like, nope, just nope. You aren't ever going to do that. The reality is that's never going to happen in standardized testing, but testing has moved beyond simple answer getting. And I want mathematics to be that big, broad, beautiful experience. Otherwise, kids aren't going to fall in love with it. And that means they're not going to stick it out when it's hard. And it is hard. And again, that idea that any parent worth their salt would be screaming at the school if all they ever let their kid do in English class was spell. I don't want parents to be okay with, all my kid does is sit there and grind out answers.
As you're saying that, Peg, I was your kind of connection to English and writing poetry made me think about like when you're writing a 5-paragraph essay, you go back and you do the grammatical and spelling errors, corrections like after the thing is written. Then you go back and fine tune. So like you're fine tuning the calculation steps kind of later on, right? You're doing the big thinking, brainstorming. It's something that I'm going to grapple with now. You've given me an idea. So I'm sorry. I'm sure I'll be calling you later.
Hurrah!
Oh, Well, with that, Peg, just to thank you for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for being here after school in your classroom with no lights.
The lights out.
I asked Dwayne and he ignored me earlier in the chat, but I asked him if he could like Photoshop a lightsaber into your hand as you're waving around. I feel like that would be a perfect play into your Star Wars theme from earlier. But with that, I'm just going to close us out for today. Just a reminder to our audience, just give all your love and thanks to Peg in the chat. Love having her here today, and we're probably going to have you back sometime, Peg. I got a lot thinking already, and I know that the audience loved you.
You know where to find me.
They know where we will be back live webinar on the third Thursday of September. We will be joined by Rebecca Lewis, who is now working with the CDE and the Frame Initiative. Has a really cool job where she's trying to connect all 19 math initiatives across the state of California together, and is going to have a really wonderful presentation and some updates to share with us at our webinar in September. So super excited about that. Rebecca, I hope you're listening and hear how excited we are, and I'll be reaching out to you soon. In addition, I wanted to share with all of you that the registration for the CMC Central is now officially open. This is the earliest, I'm proud of us, Dwayne, earliest we have ever had registration open for CMC Central. Usually it's like the month before, and now we're saying, hey, we're like a few months before. So I've dropped that link in the chat for you if you are interested in joining us in Bakersfield in March. We have a long ways away, but we are copying South this year, Peg. We have an early bird registration rate, and we've never had that before. So super excited and hope to see many of you there. And then last, before I let you all go, is just continue. If you didn't get enough of us today, you can continue to check us out on Math on the Rocks, where we are streaming live pretty much everywhere. And coming to you live from CMC South this year, again, where I'm sure we'll be doing some work with convincing a skeptic, Peg. So we might have to have you pop in when you're not busy running a conference and everything in November. So
Annie's going to be there. I'm wondering if she's a potential guest.
yeah.
Just saying. We'll see.
So anywho, with that said, thank you all for your time, and we will see you in September. Take care.